The world buzzed with Adrian Knight's confession. News outlets replayed his speech endlessly, calling it the fall of a billionaire. Investors panicked, employees cried, and the Knight Foundation teetered on the edge of collapse. But inside the quiet mansion, none of that mattered. Adrian sat in his study, staring at the fire, his mind heavy but calm. For the first time in years, he felt free from the lies that haunted him. Maya entered silently, carrying a letter in her hand. "This came for you," she said softly. He took it, opening the plain envelope. The handwriting was sharp and familiar. It wasn't from Ethan Jr. or the press. It was from someone he had tried to forget. "You told the world part of the truth, Adrian, but not all of it. The rest, well, let's just say the world deserves to know everything. Meet me tonight at the Old Harbor, Warehouse 9, if you want to save what little you have left." Adrian stared at the signature. C. Clara. Maya read his expression and frowned. "It's her, isn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, she won't stop until I'm completely ruined." "Then don't go," Maya said quickly, stepping closer. "She's dangerous, Adrian. Whatever she wants, she'll drag you back into the past you're trying to escape." He looked into her eyes, his voice calm. "If I don't go, she'll make sure everyone pays for my mistakes. This ends tonight." Maya gripped his arm. "Then I'm coming with you." He hesitated but finally nodded. "All right, but no matter what happens, you stay behind me." That night the harbor was silent except for the sound of waves crashing against rusted metal. Warehouse 9 stood half-collapsed, its broken windows glowing faintly from a single flickering bulb inside. Adrian pushed open the door slowly, the echo of his footsteps filling the empty space. Clara was waiting near the center, dressed in black, holding a tablet and a small file. Her red lips curved into a bitter smile. "So the great Adrian Knight actually came," she said coldly. "How noble." "Clara," Adrian said, his tone steady. "You've done enough. What do you want from me?" She laughed softly, a sound filled with pain rather than joy. "What I want? You took everything from me, Adrian. My career, my future, my life. Do you really think a public apology erases that?" Maya stepped forward. "Clara, please, he's trying to make things right." Clara turned to her sharply. "You have no idea what this man did. You think he's changed, but you don't know the secret he's still hiding." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Enough, Clara," but she didn't stop. "Tell her, Adrian. Tell her the real reason you married her." Maya froze. "What?" Clara smiled darkly. "You think it was love? He married you to protect his company. Your father was the biggest investor in the Knight Foundation. Without your marriage, he would have gone bankrupt years ago." Maya's heart stopped. "Adrian, is that true?" Adrian's lips parted, but no words came out. His silence said everything. Tears welled in Maya's eyes as she stepped back. "So all this time, I was just part of your business?" "No," he said quickly, his voice shaking. "It started that way, but everything changed. Maya, I fell in love with you. Truly." Clara scoffed. "Love? You don't even know what that means." She threw the file onto the floor. Photos, letters, and contracts spilled everywhere. "This is your legacy, Adrian. Lies built on lies." Adrian took a slow breath, his eyes soft but firm. "You're right. I married her for the wrong reasons. But loving her is the only right thing I've ever done." Maya stood still, tears rolling silently down her face. The betrayal cut deep, but the honesty in his voice reached somewhere inside her heart. Clara's expression flickered. For a moment she seemed uncertain. Then anger returned. "I'm sending everything to the media." She raised the tablet. Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. "If that's what it takes to end this, then do it." "I'm done hiding." Clara hesitated. Her hand trembled. The fire in her eyes dimmed as if something inside her broke. Finally, she whispered, "You always get the last word, don't you?" She dropped the tablet, the sound echoing in the empty space. "You win, Adrian," she said softly, "but you'll live every day knowing what you lost." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the shadows. Maya stood silently, staring at the floor. The sound of waves and wind filled the silence between them. Adrian walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "I can't change what I did," he said softly. "But if you walk away tonight, I won't stop you. You deserve better than the man I was." She looked up, her eyes red but calm. "I don't care who you were, Adrian. I care who you are now." He blinked in disbelief as she stepped closer. "You broke me once," she whispered, "but you also taught me how to heal. Maybe we both needed to fall apart to start over." Adrian's voice trembled. "You still want to stay?" Maya nodded slowly. "Only if you promise one thing." He swallowed hard. "Anything. No more secrets." He took her hand gently, his eyes full of emotion. "No more secrets." Outside, the storm began to fade. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky in soft gold. As they stood together, the weight of the past lifted, leaving behind two souls scarred, but still standing. Maya smiled faintly. "You were her husband in name only once," she said, "but now, maybe you can finally be mine in heart." Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her as if afraid to let go again. "I already am," he whispered. And for the first time, the mansion that had been filled with silence and sorrow finally felt alive, with love, forgiveness, and the promise of a new beginning. The morning light crept through the tall glass windows of the night mansion, but there was no peace inside. Adrian stood in his study, staring at the pile of documents spread across the desk. Every paper carried the weight of his past, the lies, the deals, the signatures that built his empire on someone else's pain. His reflection in the window looked older, wearier. For years he had worn power like armor, but now it felt like chains around his soul. Maya entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. She placed one on the desk beside him and said softly, "You haven't slept." Adrian gave a faint smile. "Sleep doesn't come easily when your whole world is about to collapse." Maya looked at the papers, then back at him. "Maybe it's not collapsing," she said. "Maybe it's changing into something better." He turned to her, his eyes tired but full of gratitude. "You still believe in that?" "I believe in you," she replied gently. He looked down, unable to hold her gaze. "You shouldn't." Before Maya could speak, the sound of a phone buzzed sharply. Adrian picked it up. It was a message from Ethan Jr. "No more delays. Noon today. I'll be at the press conference hall. Bring the documents, or I will." Adrian stared at the message for a long time, then nodded slowly. "It's time." Maya's hand gripped his arm. "Adrian, if you do this, you'll lose everything. Your company. Your name." He looked into her eyes and said quietly, "Then I'll finally have something real to build from." By noon, the media hall was crowded with reporters and flashing cameras. The buzz of voices filled the air as whispers spread. The great Adrian Knight is holding an emergency press conference. Maya stood beside him, her heart pounding as she saw the people gathering. Ethan Jr. waited in the front row, his expression calm but cold. Behind him, Clara leaned against a wall, a small smirk playing on her lips. When Adrian stepped up to the podium, the noise died instantly. He looked over the sea of faces, took a deep breath, and began. "For years, I've been called a visionary, a leader, a self-made man," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "But none of those titles tell the real story. The truth is, I built my empire on betrayal." A wave of gasps filled the hall. Cameras clicked rapidly. He continued, his voice unwavering. 20 years ago, I betrayed my closest friend, Ethan Cross Sr. I made a deal that destroyed his company and his life. I told myself it was survival, but it was greed. And I've carried that guilt every day since." Ethan Jr.'s eyes flickered with surprise. He hadn't expected Adrian to confess so openly. Adrian placed the documents on the table before him. "These are the files that prove everything. I'm handing them over publicly so no one can hide the truth again. The Knight Foundation will face investigation, and I will accept whatever consequences come." Reporters began shouting questions, flashes blinding him, but Adrian didn't flinch. He had finally spoken the truth. Clara suddenly stepped forward, her voice slicing through the noise. "You think one confession erases everything?" she shouted. You think the world will just forgive you because you look sorry? The cameras turned toward her. Adrian looked at her quietly. No, he said softly. I don't want forgiveness. I just want to stop pretending. Clara's expression wavered, the anger in her eyes fading for a second before she turned and stormed out. Ethan Jr. stood slowly. The crowd's noise faded again as he approached the stage. You actually did it, he said quietly. You gave up everything, Adrian nodded. Your father deserved the truth. Ethan looked down, his voice trembling slightly. He wanted justice, not revenge. I thought destroying you would make me feel better. But now... He stopped, his jaw tightening. Now, I just feel empty. Adrian stepped closer, his tone soft. Revenge doesn't heal pain, Ethan. It only passes it on. Ethan's eyes glistened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he extended his hand. I can't forgive you. Not yet. But I won't destroy what's left of your name either. Adrian nodded, accepting the hand with quiet respect. That's more than I deserve. Maya, watching from the side, felt tears roll down her cheeks. For the first time since their marriage, she saw Adrian not as a man trapped by pride, but as someone set free by truth. The conference ended in chaos, reporters shouting, people arguing, headlines already being written. But as Adrian and Maya walked out hand in hand, the noise behind them didn't matter anymore. Outside, the rain began to fall lightly, washing the dust off the city streets. Maya looked at him and said softly, So, what now? He smiled faintly, looking up at the gray sky. Now we start over. Not as Adrian Knight, the millionaire, just as Adrian, the man who finally found his heart. She squeezed his hand, whispering, and maybe the husband who will finally love his wife. He turned to her, his eyes warm for the first time in years. Yes, he said, his voice deep and full of emotion. It's time I learn how to do that. As they walked away from the flashing cameras and the crumbling empire behind them, the world saw a fallen tycoon. But Maya saw something else. A man reborn. Yet, somewhere across town, in a dark office, a man watched the live broadcast on his screen. He leaned back in his chair, a shadowed smile forming on his lips. The story isn't over yet, he murmured. Adrian Knight may have confessed, but not everything he said was true. The air in the mansion grew tense as the name echoed in Adrian's ears. Ethan Cross, Jr. The blood drained from his face and his hands clenched unconsciously. For years he had feared this moment. The past he had buried so carefully had returned, not as a whisper, but as a storm standing right at his door. Maya looked at him, her heart pounding. Adrian, who is he? She asked softly, though she already knew. He took a slow breath, his voice low and heavy. He's the son of the man I destroyed. Before Maya could respond, the sound of footsteps filled the hall. A tall young man entered the room, dressed in a dark coat, his sharp eyes filled with quiet anger. There was something familiar about him, his confidence, his calm fire. He stopped in front of Adrian, his gaze cold but steady. So, the young man said, this is the famous Adrian Knight, the man who built an empire out of betrayal. Adrian didn't move. His face remained calm, but inside, his chest burned with guilt. Ethan, he said carefully, I didn't expect to see you here. You didn't expect me to survive long enough to come back, did you? Ethan Jr. shot back, his tone sharp. My father trusted you. He believed in your friendship more than anything. And what did you give him in return? You ruined him. You took everything from him and from me. Maya stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Ethan, please. This isn't the place for anger. You've carried pain for years. I can see that. But so has he. Ethan turned toward her, his eyes softening slightly. You must be the wife, he said. I read about you in the news, the graceful heart of the Knight Foundation. Tell me, Mrs. Knight, does your husband tell you how many people he crushed to build that foundation? Maya looked down for a moment, but then raised her head bravely. No, he didn't, but I know the man he's become. He regrets what he did. He's trying to change. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Regret doesn't bring back the dead, Mrs. Knight. Adrian finally spoke, his tone steady but filled with sorrow. You're right. Nothing can change what I did. I won't defend it. But if you came here for revenge, you won't find peace that way. I've lived with guilt every day since that moment. Ethan's jaw tightened. Guilt? Do you think guilt is enough? My father died with your name on his lips, Adrian. You destroyed him, and you expect me to forgive you? Adrian took a step forward, his eyes meeting Ethan's without fear. No, he said softly. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you'll understand why I did it. My father forced me into that deal. I tried to find another way, but he left me with a choice. My family or Ethan's. I was a coward. I chose wrong, and I've paid for it ever since. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice quieter. If that's true, then you'll help me expose the truth. Maya's eyes widened. Expose? Ethan nodded. The documents of that deal still exist. They show everything. The betrayal, the lies, the signatures. I want the world to see what really happened. Adrian's heart pounded. If you do that, everything I've built will fall. Thousands of people will lose their jobs. Maybe, Ethan said coldly, but at least justice will finally be served. Maya stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. Ethan, please listen. I understand your pain, but destroying Adrian won't heal you. You'll just become another man carrying anger instead of peace. Ethan looked at her quietly, and for the first time there was conflict in his eyes. He wasn't heartless, just broken. I don't want money or pity, he said softly. I just want the truth to live again. My father deserves that. Adrian nodded slowly. Then let me make it right. Maya turned to him surprised. Adrian. He looked at her gently. It's time, Maya. I've run from my past long enough. He turned to Ethan. You'll have the files you need. But I'll face this myself, not hide behind you or anyone else. Ethan stared at him, taken aback. He hadn't expected Adrian to surrender so easily. You'd really risk everything? Adrian's eyes softened. I've already lost everything that matters once. I won't make the same mistake again. He glanced briefly at Maya, who stood silently, tears glistening in her eyes. Ethan hesitated for a moment before giving a small nod. You have 2 days, he said. I'll be waiting. Then he turned and walked out of the mansion, leaving behind a trail of silence and tension. When the door closed, Maya turned to Adrian, her voice trembling. You don't have to do this. There must be another way. He smiled faintly, his voice low. There's always another way, but not this time. I need to end this the right way. Not for me, but for the man I destroyed, and for the woman who stayed when I didn't deserve her. Maya stepped closer, tears falling down her cheeks. Adrian, you don't have to face it alone. He reached out and brushed a tear from her face gently. I've been alone my whole life, Maya, but not anymore. You gave me something I thought I'd never have again. Hope. For the first time since their wedding, he touched her hand, holding it tightly. His warmth surprised her, and her heart beat faster. There was no more distance, no more silence, only truth between them. But outside the mansion, in the dark of the night, a black car was parked across the street. Inside, Clara sat quietly, watching through the rain-specked window. She whispered to herself, It's too late, Adrian. The truth won't just set you free, it will destroy you. The night was quiet, but inside the night mansion, silence was heavier than thunder. Maya stood near the window, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Adrian's words kept echoing in her mind. Some truths destroy everything. She had waited years for him to open his heart, but now that he was close to it, a wall of secrets stood between them. She didn't know whether to step closer or walk away before the truth broke her completely. Adrian sat alone in his study, staring at an old file locked inside his safe. The weight of his past pressed down on him like a chain he could never escape. The document inside wasn't just paper. It was the proof of the betrayal that built his empire. Years ago, when his company was on the verge of collapse, his best friend and partner, Ethan Cross, had trusted him with everything. But Adrian's father had forced him to make a cruel choice: either sacrifice Ethan's company to save his own, or lose everything they had built together. Adrian signed the papers that destroyed Ethan, and the guilt had followed him ever since. That was the day he changed. That was the day he buried his heart. When Maya came quietly into the study, he didn't notice her at first. She stood behind him, her voice calm but strong. "How long will you keep punishing yourself, Adrian?" He turned sharply, startled. "You shouldn't be here." "I live here," she replied softly. "And I'm tired of living with a man I don't even know." Adrian closed the file and looked away. "You don't need to know everything, Maya. Some parts of me aren't worth knowing." She stepped closer, her eyes steady. "That's not true. Everyone has darkness. But hiding it doesn't make it disappear. It only makes it grow." Her words hit deeper than she realized. He had spent years convincing himself he didn't deserve love, that he had ruined too many lives to ever be forgiven. But now, hearing her speak with such quiet strength, he felt something stir inside him. A warmth he thought he had lost forever. Adrian stood up slowly, his expression conflicted. "Do you really want to know the truth?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. He walked to the safe, unlocked it, and placed the old file on the table. "This," he said, "is what turned me into the man you married. I destroyed my best friend's company to save my family's business. I didn't just hurt him, I ruined his life. And when he tried to rebuild, he was killed in a car accident on his way to meet me. The guilt never left me." Maya stared at the file, her heart aching for him. "You were young," she whispered. "You made a choice you didn't want to make." He shook his head bitterly. "Don't defend me. I was a coward, and that's why I can't give you what you deserve. I can't love you the way you want, because I don't even love myself." Maya took a deep breath and walked closer until she stood right in front of him. "Adrian, love doesn't wait for a perfect man. It waits for a real one. You think guilt makes you unworthy, but it's what makes you human." He looked into her eyes for the first time without walls between them. Something about her calm, unwavering presence broke through the years of pain he had carried. "Why are you still here, Maya?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. "You could have walked away long ago." "Because I see the man you try to hide," she said softly, "and he's worth fighting for." Adrian's heart ached at her words. He didn't touch her, he couldn't, but for the first time, he wanted to. Before he could respond, the phone on his desk buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed instantly. It was a message from an unknown number. "If the truth about Ethan Cross's death comes out, your empire will crumble. Pay the price or watch it burn." Adrian's face went pale. Maya noticed the fear in his eyes. "What is it?" she asked. He showed her the phone and she read the message. "Someone is threatening you?" He nodded. "Someone knows about the past. Everything. I thought it was buried forever. Could it be Clara?" Maya asked quietly. Adrian hesitated. "I don't know. But if this goes public, not only will I lose everything, you'll be dragged into it too." Maya took a step forward, her voice firm. "Then we face it together." Adrian looked at her in disbelief. For years, he had believed he was alone in his war against the past. Yet, here she was, standing by his side, ready to share the weight he had carried alone. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Then earn me," she replied softly, her eyes filled with quiet determination. For the first time in years, Adrian smiled faintly. It was small, uncertain, but real. "You really are something, Maya," she smiled back. "You're just realizing that now?" He laughed quietly, a sound she had never heard from him before. But the moment of peace didn't last long. A loud knock echoed through the mansion doors. Adrian froze. Maya frowned. Emma entered the room, her face pale. "Sir," she said nervously, "there's someone here to see you." "He says it's urgent." Adrian's heart sank. "Who is it?" Emma hesitated before answering. "He says his name is Ethan Cross, Jr." Maya's eyes widened. "Ethan's son." Adrian's expression darkened. "The past," he murmured, "has finally come to collect its debt." The morning after the rain, the air around the night mansion felt heavier than usual. Maya woke up early, her mind still filled with questions about Adrian's late-night call and the sadness she had seen in his eyes. She wanted to believe that her husband was slowly changing, that maybe he was finally beginning to notice her. But something deep inside warned her that a storm was coming. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel it. Adrian had left before sunrise. He hadn't said where he was going, only that he had meetings to attend. Maya, now used to his silence, didn't ask questions, but today something felt different. The tension in his voice last night, the guilt in his eyes. It all pointed to something from his past, something that was coming back. She spent her morning in the garden, trimming flowers when Emma, the old housekeeper, walked up holding an envelope. "Mrs. Knight," she said softly, "a lady came earlier. She said it was urgent and that this letter was meant for you." Maya frowned. "A lady? Who was she?" "I didn't catch her name," Emma replied, but she looked troubled, like she carried a heavy secret. Maya took the envelope carefully. It had no name on it, only her initials, M.K., written in neat handwriting. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short letter that read, "Dear Mrs. Knight, you don't know me, but I once knew your husband well. There are things you deserve to know, things he never told you. Meet me tomorrow evening at the Blue Orchid Cafe at 6 p.m. Come alone." A friend Maya's heart began to race. Who could this be? Was it connected to the strange call Adrian had made last night? For a moment she thought about ignoring it, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She folded the letter and kept it in her drawer, deciding to go the next day. That evening, when Adrian returned home, Maya noticed something unusual. His usually calm face looked tense. He avoided her eyes, taking off his jacket and loosening his tie as he walked straight to his study. She followed him with her gaze, wondering what was hiding behind those silent steps. "Adrian," she said softly, "you look tired." He paused at the door but didn't turn around. "It's just work," he replied. "You've been quiet lately," she continued. "If something is wrong, maybe I can help." For the first time he looked at her and there was something raw in his eyes. Regret, fear, or maybe confusion. But it disappeared just as fast. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he said, his voice cold again. She gave a faint smile. "You always say that." When the door closed behind him, she sighed deeply. For 3 years, she had tried to break through that wall he built around himself. And just when she thought she was getting close, something from his past seemed to pull him away again. Inside the study, Adrian sat in silence, staring at the photo frame on his desk. It was from their wedding day. Maya was smiling brightly in the picture while he looked stiff, emotionless. Now, for the first time, he truly saw how unfair he had been to her. She had given him nothing but kindness while he had given her nothing but distance. But guilt wasn't enough. He needed to fix what he had broken. If only the past would let him. The next day came quickly. By evening, Maya found herself standing outside the Blue Orchid Cafe, her heart pounding. She scanned the crowd until she saw a woman sitting alone near the window. She looked elegant but tired, as if life had worn her down. When Maya approached, the woman smiled gently. "Mrs. Knight," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you for coming. Who are you?" Maya asked. "My name is Clara Evans," the woman replied. "I knew Adrian a long time ago." The name struck Maya like lightning. Clara. The same name she had heard him say on the phone. The same person he told to stay in the past. "I know this must be strange," Clara continued, "but I came to tell you something. Adrian wasn't always this cold. Years ago, we were in love. We planned to marry, but my father was in trouble, and I had no choice but to disappear. I broke him in ways I never meant to, and I think that's why he can't love anyone now. Not even you." Maya's fingers trembled around her cup. The words hit hard, but she stayed calm. "Why tell me this now?" she asked quietly. Clara sighed. "Because I saw you in the papers standing beside him. You're different from him, Mrs. Knight. You have warmth. He doesn't deserve to lose someone like you because of what I did." She paused, her eyes glistening. "But there's something else. Someone sent me a message last week, threatening to expose the truth about Adrian's business past. If it goes public, his entire empire could fall. I thought he should know. And maybe you should too. Maya felt her stomach twist. A hidden truth, a secret past, and now a threat. It was too much at once. What truth? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Clara looked around, lowering her tone. It's about the project that made him a millionaire. The deal that destroyed his best friend's company. He's been hiding the guilt for years. That's why he turned into the man he is now. Maya sat still, her mind spinning. The man she thought she knew was full of hidden pain and buried mistakes. Suddenly, his coldness made sense. He wasn't cruel by choice. He was protecting himself from his own guilt. When Maya returned home that night, Adrian was waiting in the living room. He looked at her as she entered, his eyes sharp. "Where were you?" he asked quietly. She froze. "I went out for coffee. With Clara Evans?" he said, his voice firm, not loud but dangerous. Her breath caught. "You knew?" He stepped closer, his face unreadable. "I saw the message on your phone. You shouldn't have met her, Maya. You don't understand what she's capable of." "And what about you, Adrian?" She shot back, her voice trembling but brave. "What are you hiding from me?" His jaw tightened. "You don't want to know." "But I do," she said firmly, "because I can't live like a stranger in my own marriage anymore." He turned away, his silence heavier than any answer. For a moment it felt like the air in the room stopped moving. Finally he whispered, "Some truths destroy everything, Maya, and I don't want to lose you before I even earn you." The morning sun shone softly through the tall glass windows of the night mansion, filling the silent halls with light. Maya sat at the dining table stirring her coffee, lost in thought. Something about Adrian's gaze last night had felt different. For the first time, he looked at her as if she wasn't invisible. It was a small moment, but for her, it meant everything. She didn't expect love to bloom overnight, but at least now there was hope. A tiny spark in the cold darkness that surrounded them for years. Adrian, however, was not as calm as he looked. Sitting in his car outside the company building, he stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The image of Maya's calm eyes haunted him. He tried to brush it off, but the truth was undeniable. He couldn't ignore her anymore. The woman he had married out of obligation was no longer the quiet, fragile girl he thought she was. She had become strong, graceful, and independent, and something about that scared him, because once before, he had cared for someone like that, and it had destroyed him. Inside his office, Adrian found a sealed envelope on his desk. There was no name on it, only a small golden logo of the Knight Foundation. He frowned, tearing it open. Inside was a letter, typed neatly on white paper. As he read the first few lines, his expression hardened. The letter spoke of a person from his past, Clara Evans, the woman who once loved him and betrayed him. The letter claimed Clara was back in town and wanted to meet him about something important. For years, he had buried that chapter of his life deep inside. Clara had been his first love, the one he trusted completely. They had plans to marry before she suddenly disappeared, leaving him with nothing but a message that she chose someone else. That heartbreak had turned him cold, made him swear never to let love control him again. When his family forced him into marrying Maya, he agreed, not for love, but because it was easier than feeling pain again. But now, the name Clara brought back everything he tried to forget. He clenched the letter in his hand, his jaw tight. "Why now?" he muttered under his breath. Later that evening, when Adrian returned home, he found Maya sitting on the balcony, reading a book. Her hair danced in the wind, her face calm under the sunset glow. He wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She looked up and smiled softly, and for a moment the world felt quiet and peaceful. He almost smiled back. "Almost, Adrian," she said gently. "You look tired." "Long day." He hesitated before nodding. "Yes." "Long day? Would you like dinner?" she asked. "I'll eat later," he replied quickly and walked away, unable to handle the warmth in her voice. It reminded him too much of what he lost once, and what he might lose again. Later that night, Maya passed by his study door and noticed it was slightly open. She paused when she heard a faint voice from inside. Adrian was on the phone again, his tone low but serious. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "That part of my life is over." There was silence, then his voice softened slightly. "No, I'm married now. It's complicated. Just leave it in the past." Maya froze. Married now? Complicated? Who was he talking to? The sound of his voice was heavy, almost sad, not the cold businessman tone she was used to. Her heart filled with confusion and a strange pain she couldn't explain. She wanted to believe he wasn't hiding something, but his words made her doubt. When Adrian stepped out moments later, he found her standing near the hallway pretending to water the flowers in a vase. Their eyes met, and for a second, guilt flashed across his face. She smiled faintly, trying to hide her unease. "Working late again?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, something came up from the past." "The past?" she repeated softly, but he said nothing more and walked away. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the sadness in his voice. Maybe the secret behind his coldness wasn't arrogance or pride. Maybe it was pain. But what kind of pain could make a man build walls so high around his heart? The next morning, Adrian left early for a meeting at a quiet cafe outside the city. When he entered, a woman in a white dress stood up. It was Clara. She looked older, but still had the same soft smile that once charmed him. "Adrian," she whispered. He sat down slowly. "Why are you here, Clara?" "I had to tell you something," she said. "I didn't leave you because I wanted to. I was forced to. My father was in debt, and I was threatened. I thought disappearing would protect you." Adrian's chest tightened. For 3 years he had hated her for leaving, and now she was saying it wasn't by choice. "You expect me to believe that?" he asked bitterly. Clara looked down. "You don't have to believe me, but I wanted you to know that I never stopped loving you." He turned away, struggling to hide his emotions. "It's too late," he said firmly. "I'm married." But deep inside, the truth tore him apart. He wasn't really married in heart, not yet. His marriage with Maya had never been real love. Not until recently, when her quiet strength began to reach the part of him that he thought was dead. As he left the cafe, rain started to fall, washing the streets clean. He looked up at the gray sky and thought about Maya waiting at home. For the first time, his heart felt heavy. Not because of Clara, but because of what he was about to lose if he didn't face the truth. Back at the mansion, Maya sat by the window, watching the rain, just like she did the night she overheard his cruel words. But this time, she wasn't crying. She whispered to herself, "Whatever he's hiding, I'll find out. And maybe, this time, he'll finally see me."
For 3 years, Maya lived in the big, cold mansion that never felt like home. She was the wife of Adrian Knight, a billionaire who had everything a man could want: success, power, and fame, except love. Their marriage was not built on feelings or dreams. It was a deal between two families who wanted to merge their companies. On their wedding day, Maya had worn a beautiful white gown and smiled for the cameras, but inside her heart was shaking. Adrian stood beside her, handsome and calm, yet his eyes looked as distant as the stars. He did not hold her hand, did not whisper a single soft word. He just did what was expected, like it was a business meeting, not a marriage. From that day onward, they shared a house, but never a life. Maya tried to be a good wife in the beginning. She would wake up early, prepare breakfast, and wait for him to join her at the table. But Adrian always left before she came downstairs. When she asked him about his day, he gave short answers. When she smiled at him, he only nodded politely. To others, their marriage looked perfect. They appeared together at charity galas, company dinners, and family events. But the moment they came home, silence filled the air. Adrian would go straight to his study, and Maya would eat dinner alone. Sometimes she could hear the sound of his typing behind the closed door, a reminder that work mattered more to him than she ever could. Still, Maya stayed. She stayed because she remembered the man she once met before all this. Years ago, when they first crossed paths at a family gathering, Adrian was different. He laughed easily and had kindness in his eyes. He wasn't the cold man she now lived with. Something had changed him, something she could never understand. Maybe it was betrayal, loss, or just the heavy world of business that hardened his heart. But even now, in his silence. She sometimes caught a glimpse of that same man when he looked away too slowly or hesitated before saying something cold. Those small moments kept her hope alive. Her only friend in the mansion was Emma, the old housekeeper who had worked there for many years. Emma often told her softly, "He wasn't always like this, dear. The world made him this way. Give it time, but how much time?" 3 years had already passed. Every day felt like the same cold winter. One rainy evening, Maya stood by the window watching raindrops race down the glass. Adrian came home late, as always, wearing his dark suit, his expression unreadable. She wanted to speak to him, to tell him she missed him, even though they lived together. But before she could, his phone rang. He turned away to answer it, his voice calm yet sharp. "She's just my wife on paper," he said. "Don't worry about her." Those words hit Maya harder than she could have imagined. Her body froze, her heart broke, and tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She stayed quiet, waiting for him to finish the call, but when he walked past her, he didn't even notice her standing there. The man she loved didn't even see her pain. When the door to his study closed, Maya sank into the couch and covered her face. That night, she didn't cry loudly. She just let silent tears fall until her heart felt empty. But the next morning, something inside her shifted. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman who had forgotten her worth. She whispered to her reflection, "No more." If he couldn't see her as his wife, she would make him see her as something more than a silent figure in his life. She would find her own strength. From that day, Maya began to change. She started attending public charity events that Adrian's company supported. She spoke kindly to people, helped children, smiled for cameras. Not as the billionaire's wife, but as Maya, a woman who cared. People began to notice her. Newspapers wrote about her grace and charm. Reporters called her the Heart of the Night Foundation. For the first time in years, Adrian began to notice her too. He saw her picture on a magazine cover one morning, her eyes glowing with confidence. Something stirred in him, a strange feeling he didn't recognize. That evening, when he came home, he found her waiting in the garden, watering the flowers. He stopped for a moment, just watching her. The woman he had ignored for 3 years looked like she belonged to another world, calm, bright and full of life. "Good evening," Maya said softly when she noticed him. He only nodded, unsure how to respond. For a brief second, his eyes met hers, and she didn't look away. There was no fear, no sadness, only quiet strength. It unsettled him. That night, Adrian sat alone in his study, unable to focus on his work. He thought about how she had changed, how her silence no longer seemed like weakness, but peace. And for reasons he couldn't explain, her voice echoed in his mind. He had told himself for years that their marriage was nothing, just a contract, but now he wasn't sure. For the first time, he wondered if he had made a mistake, if the woman he pushed away was the one thing he truly needed. But before Adrian could take a step toward her, the past he tried so hard to bury was coming back, a secret he had hidden, one that tied to the pain that made him cold. It was about to surface, and it would test not only his heart, but also the fragile bond that was just beginning to form between them.